Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that is about the Japanese internment during World War II and the effect that it has on three fictional characters. I am referring to When the Emperor Was Divine by Julia Otsuka. A pretty good book. The cover, as you can see, is an origami figure. And as far as I can remember, there doesn't appear to be any origami in the book. So a pretty unusual cover. Maybe it was the publisher who chose to do that without understanding what the book was about. So who really knows? Anyways, for those that don't know, Julia Otsuka is a Japanese American author who has written a little bit about the Japanese American experience throughout history. One of her previous books was about picture brides who immigrated to the United States and got married to the American men and went about their lives from there. And this book is about Japanese internment during World War II, as I had previously mentioned. So she's done a lot of work talking about the Japanese American experience. I don't know much else about her. I would be interested in finding out more if she published anything else beyond that, but unfortunately I can't seem to find anything. So I feel like I have to go into a little bit about the history of the Japanese internment for those that don't know as well. So during World War II, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, which led to a lot of anti-Asian, anti-Japanese sentiment. This anti-Asian sentiment had existed long before then, as during the gold rush in particular, the Americans didn't like that the Chinese were coming overseas to mine and to pick up work. There have been a lot of anti-immigration laws focused at Asian groups throughout history. I think more so than any other group. You got your Muslim bans and your Latin American immigration policies. But there are a lot of anti-alien, anti-Asian immigration laws on the books that have since been taken off, but have existed. And so with the attack on Pearl Harbor came that anti-Japanese sentiment, and perfectly normal, perfectly okay Japanese citizens who had lived in the country, some for short periods of time and some for longer periods of time, generations even, were suddenly viewed as foreign outsiders who had no place in this country. This came with a lot of racism from common citizens who thought they were the enemy since we were at war against Japan and Germany and stuff like that. Stuff that you saw with anti-German sentiment during World War I and II as well. And then this led to a bunch of laws and regulations, local and at the federal level, establishing a curfew for Japanese Americans. And then this eventually led to what Roosevelt signing an executive order that established internment camps on the West Coast in the Utah area. And from there, Japanese Americans were put in these prison camps, allowed to work, allowed to reach out to the outside. It wasn't it was similar to the concentration camps that the Germans put the Jews in and other groups, but not completely. There wasn't extermination policies, and as far as I can tell, there wasn't any illicit science experiments being done on Japanese Americans, at least that the government hasn't revealed yet. So you got a whole bunch of that. The Japanese Americans were eventually released, given a paltry apology, and let to go on from there, but the government did nothing to sway the anti-Japanese sentiment that existed after that point. Without further ado, let's talk about this unusual situation around the weird, So I'll do a little summary, a little analysis, and we will move on from there. So When the Emperor Was Divine focuses on three unnamed characters, a mother, a son, and a daughter who are living in the California area at the start of World War II. Unfortunately, the father in the family was hauled off to prison after the bombing of Pearl Harbor because he was viewed as a potential spy, a potential threat to the security of America. And so the family's kind of been on their own since then. One day, the mother is running about her errands, and she sees a notice at the post office that says that all Japanese Americans need to board a train to go to an internment camp for the time being. So the mother packs and takes some of the family animals to neighbors. Sets about trying to make some maintenance on the house before she leaves. She ends up killing the family dog, as the dog is pretty old and there's nowhere for the dog to go at this time. So she just kills it and buries it in the backyard. And then when the time comes, they all board the train to go to the Utah area. They're taken to Delta Camp, which is a military base, and told that they can't escape. They have to obey all rules, and they have to stay in their designated area, and they can't talk about any Shinto-based religions or any religions that focus on worship of the emperor. Life in the camp is very difficult for all three members of this family. The mother tries to hold a brave face through all this, but she eventually loses hope, and that carries on even after they are released from the internment camp. The son tries to find things to do, but he sees images of his father everywhere at the camp, and he recalls how much he loved his father and how the only contact he really has with him are letters, which are heavily censored at the time, and he's also feels like he's growing distant from his sister, and that every night he wakes up disoriented because he doesn't know how he got to the internment camp, and he feels like he's back home, but he has to be reminded, which certainly wouldn't feel good. And then there's the daughter, who is growing distant from her family and hangs out with some of her friends in the camp, although they exclude her from some activities. So she's not feeling too good about that. And she does return to the family eventually, and they rebond. But it's hard to feel any love in this internment camp. Eventually, after signing a loyalty pledge, which the mom notes, what even is loyalty at this point? It's just a word. They sign the pledge. They are allowed to go back to their home, and they notice that their community and their home is largely changed. There were people who lived in their home previously, but after they were gone, and they promised to pay rent and stuff, but they ended up not doing that. The community members view them with a little bit more suspicion. Some welcome them back, but there's a lot more racism in the community than they had previously known due to the anti-Japanese sentiment that developed as a result of World War II. There's also the fact that the mom can't get a job because the prejudice from the community, again, from the employers, and some employers even tell her that they don't want to upset the customers by hiring a Japanese woman. They offer her positions in the back room, but the mom is worried about ruining her eyes in the process. So this creates a number of financial and personal difficulties for the family. Luckily, she is able to find some back-breaking work doing cleaning, but again, that's back-breaking. No one wants to do that, but that's all that's available for her at this time. And then finally, the father is released from prison and comes home, but the entire family notice that he's greatly changed. Like his skin is sagged. He's older in the face. He's wearing dentures now. He's depressed because of his time in prison, and he can't find the energy to go outside with the family. And he's no longer the jovial man that the son remembers him as being. So unfortunately, this internment has changed everybody. for the worse. And so the story ends with the children looking around the community for the rose bushes that her mom had planted. And so there's a bit of a positive there, but the story largely ends on a downer note by how much the entire family has changed and how much society doesn't want them around anymore. In terms of analysis, one thing that I really like about this story is how Otsuka captures the abnormality of the moment. At the beginning of the story, the mother, when she finds out that they have to move and go on this train to whatever internment camp they're going to, the mom starts packing as if everything is normal. She goes about setting her house in order, but this is not a normal event. This is something that's uprooting their entire lives. And one way that Otsuka shows this is by the mother casually taking out a shovel and beating their dog to death before burying it in the backyard. Kind of an out of nowhere extreme moment. But again, this is an extreme moment that's happening, an extreme event in their lives. The internment camp is no small thing. An entire group, an entire demographic of America is being sent to these prison camps. So that really highlights how this isn't just a run of the mill everyday thing. This is an extreme event, and so I like how Otsuka brings attention to that. I also think that Otsuka is really good at highlighting the disorientation of the camps for each character. How the mom is trying to have the niceties of home, but they're not really available in this internment camp. And so eventually the mom just sort of gives up hope and deals with what she has rather than trying to seek out anything even marginally better, because the camp might not be able to give it to them. The son keeps waking up every night wondering where he is, and he has to be reminded that he's in this internment camp, which doesn't feel good at all. And the little girl is trying to make friends with the other young child prisoners, essentially, and she's making some friends, but they're not welcoming her and inviting her to play anything else. And it's just a reminder that this isn't a place to make friends. It's an internment camp where they've all been sent because of the crime of being Japanese. So it's all very disorienting, and nobody gets what they want ultimately at this camp, and it's really sad, really tragic, and nobody's providing any answers. One of the answers that they want is what happened to their father, and all the letters that come are somewhat censored, so there's no opportunity to really figure out what happened to their father, if he's still alive, and if he's being punished for being a so-called spy. I also like how Otsuka highlights the struggle with trying to return to normal after this internment. They return home and they try to regain their house and regain their footing in the community. But as they try to do that, they recall what happened to other Japanese Americans, how they were either run out of town or violence was done against them because they were viewed as the enemy before the war ended, and especially shortly after the war. So there's a lot of prejudice going on, which results in difficulty finding work, which results in difficulty reintegrating into the community. Whereas before, they were tolerated, and they made friends. Now those friends don't want to hang out with them anymore. The families view them with suspicion, and it's not a pleasant feeling. They're definitely aware of how the community views them as perpetual outsiders. Not only is this done to the mother, the son, and the daughter, but this is also done to the father. Stress has changed him permanently, not only physically but also mentally, as he is dealing with the depression and the knowledge that his own country viewed him as such a criminal that it imprisoned him for years without any actual evidence that he was associated with the Japanese emperor or the Japanese army. There was no proof that he was going out and betraying his country. He was simply imprisoned so he wouldn't have the opportunity to do that, and that's wrong right there. But completely changes the father, because the children note that he was jovial before, and afterwards he didn't really have time or the energy to play around with the kids, which is unfortunate. Something that's also interesting about this story is how now that they've been through this, they have none of the family members have any desire to stick their head out and gain any attention. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you. "We spoke softly and did not raise our hands, not even when we knew the answers. We followed the rules, we took tests, we wrote compositions. The happiest day of my life, what I did over my summer vacation, what I would like to be when I grow up, a fireman, a movie star. I would like to be you. We stared out the windows from time to time. We glanced at the clock. Soon the bell would ring and it would be after school and we could go home. Always we were polite. We said yes and no problem. We said thank you, go ahead, after you. Don't mention it. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. When our teachers asked us if everything was all right, we nodded our heads and said yes, of course, everything was fine. If we did something wrong, we made sure to say, excuse me. Excuse me for looking at you. Excuse me for sitting here. Excuse me for coming back. If we did something terribly wrong, we immediately said we were sorry. I'm sorry I touched your arm. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. I didn't see it resting there so quietly, so beautifully, so perfectly, so irresistibly on the edge of the desk. I lost my balance and brushed against it by mistake. I was standing too close. I wasn't watching where I was going. Somebody pushed me from behind. I never wanted to touch you. I have always wanted to touch you. I will never touch you again. I promise. I swear." And so you're really getting at the sort of neuroticism there with the desire to not be noticed, to not stick out, to not be seen as a problem. Because the last time they were seen as a problem, they were in prison for years, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants to deal with that again. And you can see how there is no return to normal at this point in time. As the new normal is, they're viewed with suspicion, as I have been mentioning, and there's this fear that they're just going to go back to prison or even killed if anyone sees them as a burden or even traitors. In a sense, they're no longer Americans. Whereas before, they felt that they might have been Japanese Americans. They might have had a real shot at the American dream. But this imprisonment, World War II, and the effects, the treatment they received afterwards, have showed them that no, they're always going to be perpetual outsiders. Last thing I want to talk about is how in this story, Otsuka doesn't use any names for the mother, the father, the son, or the daughter. And I feel like that works in a way because this story is applicable to many Japanese Americans at the time. The names aren't as important as what happened to the Japanese Americans during the time. So in a sense, it does work. However, I would have preferred if Otsuka had made a conscious choice to give the characters names, to again making a decision here and not just choosing to be vague. But that's my preference, and but I can still see how it works for this story. So there we go. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on When the Emperor Was Divine by Julie Otsuka, a pretty wonderful and pretty sad book. The treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II was not fair, and that's pretty much highlighted in this story. I definitely recommend it for you out there, as it's a decent time capsule that highlights the events and what was going on for the Japanese Americans at this time. So yeah, definitely recommend that you find it if you can and enjoy it. If you read this before or you simply want to comment on something I said in my review, let's do that. Let's talk about the Japanese internment and also how we could relate this to the treatment of Muslims post 9/11. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can talk more about Japanese American stories in the future. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and social justice-y travels. Farewell.